We appreciate you interviewing at First Church of the Firstness. Pleasure to be here. It says here you pastored up until 10 years ago, and that you've been working as a salesman ever since. What happened there? Well, my wife and I decided it would be best if I took some time away from ministry for mental health reasons. So then, what makes you think your call to the pastorate is real this time? I really think that the problem we have when we talk about pastors and mental illness is how we think of vocation. Before I record this video, let me show you guys a little bit of my surroundings right now. I'm on Karl Marx Avenue in Maputo, Mozambique. But enough about exotic locales. Let's get to the meat of the matter. So, a few weeks ago at this point, Jarrid Wilson, a relatively prominent pastor, committed suicide. One of the reasons he was relatively prominent is that he spoke openly about dealing with depression. I don't want to approach every single question that is raised by the committing of suicide by a pastor, or the questions that are raised by talking about depression and mental illness in the pastorate. I want to focus on vocation and how the way we define vocation has been problematic. I remember a pastor once told me that the way you know, or one of the ways you know that you're supposed to be a pastor, is that when you're listening to someone preach, you keep thinking about how you would have done it. And that's the only thing you can think about when you're hearing someone preach. And I thought to myself, this is 20 years ago, so I know I'm supposed to be a pastor if I'm a busybody or a know-it-all. The reason comments like that get made, though, is that there's sort of a mystical sense to how we think about pastors and their calling, which is, of course, what the word vocation means. Your vocation is your calling. And yet, no one thinks it bizarre when an engineer switches careers, right? Or when someone decides to stop being a salesman and open a coffee shop, whatever it might be. There's no sense that we feel culturally that you're letting down your calling. And yet, being a salesman is a divine call from God. So how do we think about this divine call? And is this some sort of irrevocable, hyper-mystical, written in spiritual stone sort of thing? I mean, there really is how we think about how pastors get called. The problem when this connects to mental illness is the following. When pastors say they struggle with depression or any other form of mental illness, we know they're not in sin. There's no but there. We know they're not in sin. The issue, I suppose, I have is that no one ever thinks, neither among pastors nor among the congregation, you know what? Maybe this guy would benefit from not being a pastor, at least not being a pastor for now, right? Because we feel like telling someone that they shouldn't be pastoring is an attack on their relationship with Jesus. Why? Because there's this sense of hyper-spiritualized calling, where, you know, I'm a pastor because I felt this very personal communication from God. So now, if I stop pastoring, I am perhaps admitting that that personal communication from God didn't happen. And that's a bad thing, that association exists. And it exists both among pastors and among the people. Now, it's not possible in the current evangelical atmosphere to do this, but it should be possible for both a pastor to say, I need to stop pastoring for now, I need a break. It should be without having any sort of penalty within the society of the church, any penalty in how he is perceived by people. And church leaders should be able to say that to someone who pastors. You shouldn't be pastoring right now because of your struggle. And I'm not saying that anyone who has depression shouldn't pastor. What I'm saying is that it's bad that it's not an option to stop, to take a break. It's not an easy option. It's an option that has a lot of social penalties to it, and that's bad. The church leaders should be able to say to that person, hey, you know what? And then it'd be considered. What's more, the people of God generally should be able to have that conversation as well. And the people of God are part of setting that expectation, right? Everyone just sort of creates this expectation of, you've been called to be a pastor, so you have to be a pastor, you have to stay a pastor. And for you to not be a pastor means that there's some sort of crisis in your relationship with Jesus. And I bet that right now you guys are watching this video still in that mindset of Joffrey is advocating for some sort of crisis mentality because depression is a crisis. And that's not what I'm advocating for. There's actually nothing wrong with what I just said, but that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm actually advocating for a ratcheting down of all the emotion, of all the associations, right? The problem is that, I mean, someone developed cancer or pneumonia or lost a leg. You know, if someone said, oh, I can't, I need to take a break from pastoring because I need to deal with the fact that I lost a leg, learn how to live again, no one would blink an eye. So we shouldn't do that for mental illness either. We should be able to take a break, and the conversation about whether pastors should take a break or not should happen. And we should demystify the calling that people have to be pastors. Okay? Being a pastor is a great thing. Anyone who aspires to be an elder aspires for a good thing. But it's not magic. It's okay to be a pastor and then be a salesman, just as it's okay to be a salesman and then be a pastor. All right. I hope this provides interesting fodder. Make sure you leave your comments below. The peace of Christ be upon you.